Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today is Luke Styles here. Thank you for stopping right here on my space today. In today's tutorial, I'll be taking you all through from the drafting to the cutting of this Pinafore Bustier gown you see right here, which has straps. So you can see that I paired mine with a long sleeve body hug top. So you can pair yours with a shirt or whatever it is you're comfortable in. So if this sounds like something you're really interested in learning, please continue watching, and please don't also forget to hit on that subscribe button. Trust me, it's never going to be a thing of regret. So without much ado, let's get started with what we have for today. So to make this gown, you need about 2 years to 2.5 years of African print fabric, which is what I'm working with right here, and mine is multicolored and I can use any preferred zipper of any color. So I also have my pattern paper and my straight and my curved rule and my marker as well. So let's get started. Firstly, we have to do the basic thing, which is the drafting of a half scale basic bodice, which is the foundation for any type of dress you intend making. So I have my pattern paper all spread out, so I'll leave about 3/4 of an inch from the top part of my pattern paper before I roll this line, which will be my shoulder line. I'll divide my shoulder of 14 inches into 2, so I have 7 inches. I'll subtract 1 inch from that 7 inches because this is an off shoulder as well, and right there I'll mark 6 inches on my shoulder. Then from that 6 inches point, I came down by 8 inches, which will be for my armhole, and now connect these two dots together and extend this other line. So on this my armhole, I'll divide what I have into 2 equal halves. I'll get the middle. On that middle, I will go in by 1/2 an inch right here. So this other line which I extended is called the chest line. So on that chest line, I will mark the quarter of my bust circumference, which is 9.5. So when I must have marked that, I will now go ahead and connect all these dots together from my shoulder down to my chest line. So the next, I'll place my tape on my shoulder line and I'll get my bust point of 10 inches, my under bust of 13 inches, and my half length of 16 inches. Then I'll add extra 1/2 an inch to that for my joining allowance to the lower part of my gown. So all these points I made so far, I've gone ahead now to roll them out. So I labeled all of these lines in case you're not familiar with them. As you can see, it is fully written on the screen. So I'll divide my nipple to nipple point of 7 inches into 2. So I have 3.5 inches. I'm going to make the mark on all these lines. Then I'll extend them into a straight line. So towards the center front of this my dart, I'm going to go mark like 3/4 of an inch away at both sides of this my dart leg, and I'll extend this point to my under bust line. So if you're in a bigger bust size, you can use about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. So for my bust point line, I marked 1/2 an inch down, and I'm going to connect this now with this other part of my curve rule this way. So that's the essence of having your curve rule and your stretch rule while drafting. So on the chest line I have right here, I'll also mark 3/4 of an inch away from my dart, and I'll also use this my curve rule. So I want you to pay proper attention to the way I'm positioning my curve rule for any type of dart I want to create. So now we are done creating our dart. On my chest line, I'm going to measure out what I have on my dart. So all I have there should be 1.5 inches, because when you mark 3/4 of an inch at both sides, you're going to have 1.5 inches. So I've gone ahead now to replace my dart on my chest line because we'll be cutting out our dart. So the next is to divide my waist circumference by 4. So what I have there is 8 inches, which I've made a point right there. So I've gone ahead to measure my dart as well, and I've replaced it. So I'm now going to connect these 2 points from my chest line down to my waistline. So now we are done drafting for the front part of our dress. So I'll go ahead and cut out the base and also the sides and the armhole respectively. So I actually don't want to have this curved. I just want it to start exactly from my chest line. But if you actually want yours to go higher, or the neck of yours to be higher from the chest line, you can just go by 1.5 inches as I'm illustrating right here using my pen, and you just go ahead and connect this way into your armhole. Okay, so but me, I just want to maintain this my chest line as the neck depth. All right, so from that my chest line, and I slash this straight. Okay, this is not going to have any form of sweetheart neckline or whatsoever. So I now measure what I have from my shoulder to that point where I cut off my chest line, and it's 8 inches. So having cut all of this, now I'll also go ahead and cut out for my dart. So watch closely so you know the parts where I'm cutting out and the parts where you're not supposed to cut out. So for my stitching allowance, I'll add it when I'm cutting this on my fabric. So having done this, you can see how this is looking already. I'm going to get a fresh pattern paper to draft out the back part of our dress. So because that part is not straight, I had to use my ruler to get a straight line. Then from that line which I marked, I will mark half of an inch. So this half of an inch is going to be for my zipper allowance. So after marking these points, I'll also connect it into a straight line. So this my front part of my dress now is 2. So the smaller part is the center front and the bigger part is the side front. As you can see, I'm labeling it right now. So I'm just going to get this my center front, which you can also call your CF, and I'll place it exactly on that second line I marked right there, because I'm going to use the front part of this my dress to draft out the back part of my dress. Okay, so using my masking tape now, I'm taping it down to this other clean sheet or part of my pattern paper so that I can trace this out. But remember that the back part of this dress will be having a dart. So after taping this down, I marked 1 inch. So this 1 inch will be for the back dart. The dart for the front and the back parts are usually not the same. So I placed my side front pattern paper on exactly that 1 inch I marked, and make sure that the lines I have on my side front align with the ones I have on the center front, as you can see right here if you watch closely. I also use my masking tape to tape this down to this my other clean sheet of pattern paper, and now I'm tracing out the base. I'll trace out the sides and also trace out the top part. So the space I have for my darts, I'll also go ahead and mark it right there. Okay, so this is all I have. So after tracing all of this out and making sure I take note of the spaces I have in between these, I'll go ahead now to remove the front part of my dress from the other pattern paper I have right here. So I'm going to use my ruler to connect all of these lines together so that it can be very visible. So when I'm done with that, I'll go ahead and also recreate my dart right here. So from that second line which I marked, I'm going to get my nipple point of 3.5 inches, and you see that it falls in between these 2 marks I made right here. So this is to show you that this is like how to do it. Okay, so I extended that line to the upper part of this my back dress, and I'm going ahead now to cut out the base, the sides, and also the top part. So before I go ahead to slash this back part of my dress, I'll go ahead and label it, of my paper, I'll go ahead and label it my center back and also my side back, just as I did for the front part. Okay, but before I go ahead to do that, from the zipper I'll go up by 1.5 inches and I make a mark right there. So I'm going to slant this in towards the side, but it's not really going to get to the sides of this my pattern paper. So like 2 inches away from the sides, I slanted this. Now I'm going to cut this out. So this is to eliminate any sort of bulge when we are done fixing our zipper. So this is like the best method to get rid of that. Okay, so now I've labeled my center back and my side back. Now this that I have, I will slash it. So remember that we already have this 1/2 inch at both sides now. So after that, now this is the front part of my dress, the center front and the side front, the center back, and also the side back. So the next thing is to draft that for the lower part of our gown. So I also get my pattern paper. So this pattern I have right here, I'll be using it to cut out for the front part and the back part of our skirt. So I want you all to know that the back part of our skirt always has zipper. Okay, so for that reason, I marked 1/2 inch from the center of my pattern paper inward this way. So these markings, I'm going to connect them into a straight line using my ruler, and that will be my zipper allowance. So from the top part of my paper, I'll leave about 1/2 inch. Then I'll also rule this line out. So that will be my waistline. So the full length of the gown I'm working with right here is 43 inches. So I'll be subtracting my half length of 16 inches from this part of my skirt so that I can get the exact measurements I need. So I might not, you can see my 16 inches is placed on my waistline, and I counted 8 inches, which is my hip line of 8 inches. Then I'll get the length of my skirt, which is 43 inches. So I'll go ahead and extend these points I've made right here, the length of my skirt and also on the hip line. So I'll divide my waist circumference by 4 after labeling my hip line. So whatever it is I have, I'm going to mark it right there, which is 8 inches. Then on my hip line, I'll divide my hip circumference of 42.5 inches by 4, and whatever I have, I'll mark it on my hip line. Remember, I'm marking it from this line, which is for my zipper allowance. Okay, so I measured out what I had on my hip, and I subtracted 1.5 inches from that and marked it on the length of my skirt. So for my waist now, I connected these 2 points I have on my waist and also on my hip line together. Now I'm going to extend this down this way towards the length of my skirt. So one thing I want you all to know is I'm not adding any joining allowance or stitching allowance to all of these my patterns right here. Okay, so I went ahead to get my nipple to nipple point divided by 2, which is 3.5 inches. I marked it on my waistline, and from that point I came down by 5 inches. Now I extended this 5 inches line and labeled it my dart line. Now at both sides of my waistline, I'll mark half of an inch away from my darts, which I've created, and connect it just this way. So this dart, I'm going to be replacing it at the sides of my skirt. So it's going to stop exactly on that line where I label my dart line. It's not meant to exceed that. Okay, so I've gone ahead now to replace my dart of 1 inch. Now this is it for the front part of my, for the drafting of the skirt part of my gown. I'll go ahead now and cut this out. Remember, I've not added any allowance at all or whatsoever to this my pattern. So from the base, I'm going to cut out and also cut out the sides as well. So like I said, I'll be using this particular pattern paper for the front and the back part of my skirt. So before I use this to cut out on my fabric for the front part of my skirt, I will fold in this zipper allowance of half of an inch I marked earlier, because my zip will be fixed to the back part of my gown. Okay, so after I must have folded this in, I'll get my fabric which I'm working with, and I will fold this my fabric into 2, and then place this my pattern paper from the folded edge of my fabric and pin this all around. So when I must have done this, I will now add my stitching allowance. So the stitching allowance I'll be marking right here will be 1.5 inches to the sides of my skirt. So from the base of my skirt, I'm going to add 3 inches, which will be for the hemming, because there is this way I always like my Ankara dress I'm working with lining to come out. So I added extra 3 inches to that, as you can see. So I've gone ahead now to cut this out. So I believe you can see everything I've done right here so far. Don't also forget to notch your darts. So I folded in that 3 inches extra I have, and I notched it so that I can know where exactly the actual length of my skirt stopped. So for the back now, I've gone ahead to open up that zipper allowance I folded in earlier, and from that my waist I came down by 1 inch, and I slanted it to this other side just the same way I did for the upper part of our dress for the back. I hope you can remember, right? So I also brought my fabric and folded it into 2. So I've gone ahead to pin my pattern paper all around to this folded fabric I'm working with right here. For the size, I added a stitching allowance of 1.5 inches, and from the base I added 3 inches extra. When I'm done cutting this out, I'll also fold in that 3 inches so that I can get the exact length of my skirt, and I'll notch it as well. So you can see everything I've done right here so far. Then for the upper part of my dress, I've also gone ahead to cut it out on my fabric and also on my lining piece, and I added stitching allowance all around. So in the second part of this tutorial, I'll be giving you all the detailed process on how to go about the joining of all these pieces which I have cut out here so far. So I really appreciate you all, and thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all in my next one. Please don't forget to subscribe. Have a lovely time ahead of you. Bye.